What's up, people? We are live here for Unity TV. Super pumped. We have our special guest. We've got Tom Cartwright. Say hello, Tom.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
And on the panel, we've got my brother Rad, Bormeister, the maestro, the man with the plan. And we're just going to be talking shit, basically. No, we're going to talk exercise, physical therapies, lifting, and bring this in. We've got some really cool studies to review today, which I think are going to be great and useful for especially people trying to lose weight and lean up, which is pretty much everyone. And other than that, we're just going to rock it. Here we go.
Tom's a friend of ours. We've known each other for, we just figured it out, about 7 years now. We met in 2011 or 2012. Tom's been a chiropractor in North Sydney for a while, and the reason why we've got him on the show is because not only is he a friend of ours, but Tom runs a clinic down the road called Cartwright Physical Therapy, which is where we refer all of our clients to. And the reason why we do is because personally, Yani and I, we put a lot of demand on our bodies, and we require a lot of physical therapy to keep ourselves operating at the high level that we do. And we're only going to refer people to people like yourself that we really put a lot of faith in. And Tom not only is a great chiropractor and a master of a lot of other, or a practitioner of a lot of other physical therapy modalities, I guess.
Yep.
But he's someone that walks the talk, in my words. He plays a lot of tennis. He's been playing at a high level for a while, and he goes to the gym a lot and takes care of his own body. And for me, that's a really big thing. I want a physical therapist that works on me. I want them to respect their body in the same way that I respect mine, to have that deeper level of understanding. So Tom, if you want to just introduce yourself for the second time to the guys on Facebook that couldn't hear you, and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Look, I didn't like the first take anyway. It was really crap. So I think it's a blessing in disguise.
Perfect.
We have a second chance. Hey guys, the podcast will have everything he said if you ever want to listen to the Sound of Movement podcast. But we're gonna rip this to get apart now. Let's go, Tom.
All right. So obligatory plug, Remedy. Thank you so much for this complimentary organic hibiscus kiss kombucha. It is absolutely refreshing.
Yeah.
So yes,
You could plug the sink up with that.
My first degree was a music degree, I was saying. So when I left school, I pursued work in the field of music. I studied an arts and entertainment management degree at the Australian Institute of Music in Surrey Hills. I played the violin, the sax, and a bit of piano, and I was very passionate about my music, but I guess there was a burning urge within me that wanted to do something else. Ultimately, it didn't sort of come to fruition, that degree. So I went back to uni, and I was originally wanting to study physiotherapy, but it was my experience seeing a chiropractor in Chatswood that had me actually defer and change to studying chiropractic, because I just found the technique of adjusting so incredibly beneficial. And of all the modalities that I've studied today, which is quite a lot now in my 10th year of being a chiropractor, if you were to strip me of all of them and just allow me to keep one, it would be that skill to adjust, because again, I find it so hugely beneficial to musculoskeletal conditions. As Rad said, I've always lived a very active life. I've always been going to the gym since the age of 16. I've played a lot of sport: cricket, tennis, rugby, hockey, athletics. Tennis is my biggest passion, and I've been fortunate enough to have played at a pretty high level, which I think has helped me understand to a greater depth the type of injuries that not just weekend warriors will encounter, but elite level athletes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I agree with you. I think it takes somebody who's experienced at least a little bit of that to be able to treat them better. If you're not an active person and you're not involved in that sort of stuff, it's very hard for you to empathise what's going on with the patient.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I want to touch on something, because one of the, Rad and I are very lucky that we have you guys just down the road, and we go a lot. We get chin-ups all the time, even if we're not injured. But I would like, just for the people out there who have never had a chiropractic treatment before, or have never asked the questions, when I come down and I'm a little bit stiff or something's not quite right, and you guys do some spinal manipulation, what exactly, because you walk out feeling so much better, what exactly is happening? Explain that to, can you explain that? Can we discuss that?
It's a really good question. Well, first of all, let me
And guys, for you out there who are afraid of this, I call it spinal masturbation, which is a little insider joke, because it feels so fucking good. Like, it really does.
Yeah.
Once you get over that initial fear of
It's
getting
quite
manipulated.
euphoric,
It is, really, yeah.
Well, just to touch on that fear, I think the first thing to set straight is that there are no cracking of bones going on. A crack would imply a fracture.
Yeah.
And I understand the colloquial way to refer to chiropractic is, I'm going to go and get my back cracked. But really, we shouldn't speak about it that way. What's happening is more accurately described as a pop. So if you have two bones that come together, which forms a joint, those two bones are then very tightly wrapped in ligament, which is known as a joint capsule, and it's somewhat airtight, and it needs to be, because it needs to bind those two bones together so they don't come apart. If you think about all the running and jumping and lifting that we do, it's got to be very, very strong. So when we adjust somebody or manipulate or mobilize, whatever you want to call it, what we're essentially doing is we're separating the two joint surfaces. And during that minuscule moment, there will be the introduction of a partial vacuum. And vacuums can't exist, so it's that influx of air and synovial fluid that then causes a pop.
Yep.
As I said, a crack would imply a fracture, and we're not trying to crack people.
Yep.
We're trying to reintroduce movement into a joint that has become restricted.
That's it.
So there's two levels at which an adjustment works. It works, one, to restore mobility. So if you think of a stuck door, a door that's been painted too thick or hasn't been used, and you have to sort of open and close it and sort of give it a shove a few times before it starts to swing open and close freely. So at a gross level, it increases range of motion, but at a more profound level, every joint is stimulated by neurology. So there's the brain, which transfers into your spinal cord, and then it spits out nerves at various levels, and they all innervate muscles and organs and joints. So when you adjust someone, you're sending a very powerful stimulus from that level up to the brain, which then sends a reflex message back down to that level that says, what just happened here? Oh, Tom just adjusted me. Now we can move more freely. And in doing that somewhat regularly, you promote better mobility. It's a use it or lose it concept. If you never get movement into your lower back, it's just gonna continue along, becoming more and more restricted. But why you feel better from it is because it's like if you've been sitting for too long and your butt goes numb, you sort of crave that urge to stand up, move around and rub it and restore some activity into the area. That's essentially it. It's restoring some sort of awareness or activity to the region, and so, it's euphoric.
So our bodies, and this is something that I'm going to let Rad just take like a wild bull. Our bodies crave movement, right? And this
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you said that, because that's one of the topics I wanted to talk about with you. Is the concept of sort of, there's a little bit of a paradigm shift occurring in the industries right now, where we used to think that we had to really wrap the spine and protect it, but now you're seeing a lot more spinal movement, and that's something that we've integrated into our program. Rad can probably talk about this even more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love that. There are a couple of things that you said there that I really love. The use it or lose it principle, it's something that really resonates with us, and we like to use the squeaky door analogy that you used as well, where, you know, if you think of a joint as being the hinge on a door, and you get this brand new door and it just opens and closes beautifully, but if you spend the next 40 years only opening that door a partial way, then when you try to open it all the way, it just won't go there. It becomes rusty and it doesn't open properly anymore. And you know, taking your joints through partial range of motion is just the same as taking it as that same analogy. And I mean, I can testify. I'm I'm a big believer in what you guys do. You know, we wouldn't have you on here if I wasn't, and if we weren't, and you certainly wouldn't see so much of me down there.
Yeah.
But I've had my fair share of problems, and I've got something in my back called a pars defect.
Spondylolisthesis.
Spondylolisthesis.
Yeah.
That one. And Tom could tell you a lot more about that. I won't go into that too much, but it does cause me a lot of problems. I get a lot of pain in my lower back, and I manage that through movement. Movement is the only thing that prevents it from getting really, really bad. And that's a combination of strength training and mobility and just all different types of stuff that we'll touch on later. But I get to a point where if I don't come and see you guys, at least I've figured out it's probably about once every 4 to 6 weeks for me, that my pain becomes unbearable. And when I mean unbearable, like I would need to have painkillers if I didn't get down to see you guys. And I think that what you were talking about before about the pops, I think a lot of people have had bad experiences with chiropractors, but that's just like people having bad experiences with doctors or bad experiences with physios. I think it breaks my heart when I say you should go down and see these guys, they're great chiropractors, and their answer is, I don't like chiropractors, I had a bad experience. That's really unfortunate, because you could say you don't like a doctor because you had a bad experience, but there's some wonderful doctors out there that'll save your life. And what I find with good chiropractic, like when I come down and see you and Angus, that popping or the cracking that people refer to, it's such a small part of the session. There's so much soft tissue work that goes on before that, which I would call it, I don't know exactly what you guys are doing, but I would call it a massage. It's like a massage, and it is very relieving. And then that manipulation at the end, it's like the icing on the cake, really.
The icing on the cake. I love it.
I couldn't put it any better, really, Rad. A couple of things there. The crack or the pop, whatever we want to call it, it's not always necessary as well. I mean, it definitely denotes that something happened, but a lot of the times we'll attempt to adjust somebody, and there won't be an event like a popping sound. It doesn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily mean that nothing happened. Something definitely did happen. We would have moved something. Sometimes a joint is inflamed and there's fluid around the joint that muffles any sort of a sound. A lot of people are addicted to the cracking sort of sound.
That's me, I think.
Yeah, and it's understandable, because as I said, it sort of helps denote that something did happen. But the other stuff that you refer to as like a massage, I mean, that's how people will perceive it. I mean, I might call it active release technique or muscle release technique or some other sort of therapy, but it's addressing the muscle system, it's addressing the joints, the nerves. There's a number of different ways to skin a cat.
You guys also, I mean, because when I come down and, for instance, last week, let's talk about last week's treatment. I got dry needling done, which I find really helps, especially my shoulder when you do that. Quickly, can we discuss your laser, some of the cool toys that you've got down there? Because that's something that I don't even fully understand. I was reading a study on it recently where it came up again, and I was like, oh wow, they were talking about how it was really effective in certain injuries that I was reading about. Quickly, just explain what that laser is all about, because that's pretty cool.
Well, laser's one of the therapies that I use, and the reason why I have so many is because if you're trying to build somebody's body and have them get stronger or fitter, you don't just get them doing bicep curls if they want big guns. You'll mix in concentration curls with Zoderman curls, with chin-ups, because you want to stimulate the body a different way to affect a greater change. And it's the same with my approach to physical therapy. No one therapy alone will work for anyone. And so I've got dry needling, Graston technique, ART, chiropractic. And then the most recent addition is laser therapy. It's commonly known as cold laser therapy, triple LT, which stands for either low-level light therapy or low-level laser therapy. But what we should be referring to it as is PBMT, which stands for photobiomodulation therapy. Photo meaning light, bio meaning life, and modulation simply meaning to either stimulate or inhibit. So laser therapy is very simply the act of shining light onto the body, and it sounds extremely alternative, and it was a big jump for me to introduce it because, as you guys know, I'm a very hands-on practitioner, and I don't like passive techniques. I don't like standing there hovering a machine over somebody. because I've had it done in the past and it hasn't worked for me.
Yep.
Possibly it works for some people, but I'd argue that that's mostly a placebo effect, which
Yeah.
is valid, but once you know it's placebo, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah,
So
right.
with low-level laser therapy, or PBMT, first of all, it's actually an old technology. Laser's been around for ages, but the research that's being conducted now is to do with the dose and how to manipulate the frequency of the light to affect greater change in the body. So it's being used for a multitude of things. You would have heard it for laser hair removal, tattoo removal. It's used in dental surgery. Lasers used to cut diamonds, heaps of things. Yep. And they found that it's accelerating the healing of musculoskeletal tissue. And the way it does it is, the research has shown that when you penetrate tissues of the body with a certain frequency of light, there's an increase in the production of cytochrome C oxidase, which is a protein that's involved in a number of downstream chemical effects, chemical equations that lead to the production of ATP. So you guys all know what ATP is, adenosine triphosphate. Yep. That's the energy molecule that the body uses to carry out all of its functions.
Yep.
So in other words, when you shine light on injured areas of tissue, there's an increased production of ATP, which leads to faster rates of healing and decreased inflammation.
Awesome. And this thing wasn't a small investment. You chucked a
it was about
truckload of cash into
20
it.
grand for this little machine, which probably to make costs maybe $500, but that's not what you're paying for. It's the research. And to my knowledge, I'm one of only 2 people in Sydney that has one. The other one is a GP, a doctor, Dr. Roberta Chow, who runs a clinic in Castle Hill, I think, called Quantum Pain Management, and she's actually done a retrospective study or a meta-analysis, I don't know what it is, where she looked at all the research that's done on lasers and compiled it, and has put forth a very compelling paper advocating the use of laser therapy in not just musculoskeletal stuff, but cold sores. Some people are looking at it for I forget, effects of cerebral palsy, the heaps of diseases, loads of things.
I just want to quickly interrupt and do a shout out. We've got quite a few people online watching us live. Quinton, David Lyon, how's it going over in the UK, buddy? And Simon Anderson from the UK. What's
over
going on?
in the UK as well,
A lot of representation. And Sasha, hope you're doing well, brother. Haven't seen you for a while. Very quickly, one of the things I love about you, Tom, is that you're continually, you share the same passion that Rad and I share with Kaizen. You're constantly learning from other people and continuing your own, growing your own knowledge base. And recently you went and spent some time with Sarah Key. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Sarah Key is more commonly known as physiotherapist to the Queen. She's now 69 years old, Sarah is, and she started her practice, I think, in the 80s or something. And her technique is very unique. She actually treats people using her feet, which sounds very alternative, but it's actually hugely, hugely satisfying. Part of the reason why she
just quickly on that, like I've been to Thai massages before, and they walk up and down your back and sort of crack you and do all sorts of funky things. Is it like that?
No.
For those of you listening to the podcast, he's shaking his head in disbelief.
Look, 2 reasons why Sarah uses her feet. For one, it's more sparing on the practitioner's body, okay, which I realise, no patient's going to care. It's like, well, what about me? The reason why it's such an effective technique is that the pelvis is an extremely strong structure, and from the pelvis emanate a lot of the problems to do with the body, because it's literally the core of our body. It's where our home base is. It's where you need to be really set up well in order to function well in sport and just life in general. And when you can use your body weight to get stuck into those very restricted joints, you can do a more effective job. So using the feet to treat lower back pain and even thoracic pain can be very effective. So Yeah, it's essentially that. She uses her feet to literally stand on people and mobilize very stuck joints using the heel of her feet. And whilst you might think it sounds hugely uncomfortable and painful, particularly for petite people, it's not, because you're not always bearing your full body weight on people. You'll be supported by a bench, and you can load and unload people according to what they can tolerate.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And she's got some pretty interesting new theories, which something that I know Rad and I follow a lot here. You can talk a little bit about them.
Yeah, that's what I...
To do with lifting.
Yeah, well, I mean, before you even went to... I remember when you came back from this this workshop that you did with her several months ago, and you were so excited and you really wanted to connect with us about the stuff that you'd learnt there, because it was turning... a lot of things that that we all in the fitness industry had taken for just common knowledge for a long time, and just turned it on its head around lifting techniques and the way that you use the spine during these techniques. And so, and I think what got you so excited about it was that we'd been doing a lot of this stuff already before you'd seen this, which was, so for as long as I can remember, as long as I've been in the fitness industry, so 15 years, the teachings have always been, the consensus is that the spine stays completely stationary and immobile during lifting. So you bend at the hips, you keep the spine straight, you know, even to go as far as, you know, you don't rotate under load and things like that. But you definitely don't go through flexion and extension, which for those of you that don't understand is when you bend forward or arching back. And when you're under load, when you've got weight. Now, for me, that all got turned on its head when I went and trained with Ido Portal, and he taught us all these movements that come from dance, which are all around, and also some of it from gymnastics as well, like the Jefferson curl comes from gymnastics, where you do definitely go through flexion and extension under load, and every single other type of movement in the spine. And then you went off and did this workshop with Sarah Keys, and you came back really excited about some stuff that she'd shared in the same light. Yeah, that's right. Do you want to share that with us, Tom?
Well, yeah, I think the main point was that when it comes to squatting and deadlifting, we've all been told to keep a straight back, which actually means an arched back. So you have a concave curve in through your lumbar spine. And she's challenging that based on research that has been conducted from as early as the late 80s. I'm just referring to a piece of paper I've got here, a poster about a new perspective on lifting. So she's essentially saying, based on this very strong research, that we actually shouldn't arch our back and keep a concave curve in our lumbar spine when we lift, and that it is in fact okay to keep a rounded spine. And there's a number of arguments for that, which I have, and I won't go into too much, but basically when you bend and put a convex curve in your lower back, you're actually making better use of the spinal ligaments to sort of taut and tighten your back so that it's stronger during lifting. But you know, really to explore this better, it's better if we were to chat with professional powerlifters, because I think when you watch professional powerlifters deadlift, as they're setting up, as they're sort of in that crouched down position about to yank on that bar, you will actually see their lower back bow a little bit. And what they're doing is they're building tension within their intra-abdominal cavity, tightening the ligaments so that they have something to sort of push against and then lift. And yeah, you can actually utilize the pressure in your discs a lot more effectively. So I have to plead a little bit of ignorance, because I'm not a power lifter. You know, I don't deadlift very often. I do squat quite a lot. So I'm not saying outright that we should never arch our back, but what I will say is that I think the body definitely has an innate intelligence, and often our bodies get us doing what is best for us, subconsciously. sometimes it will trick us based on what sort of injuries are going on, but a lot of the time it will force us to do what we need to do based on what our anatomical capabilities are.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of digressing a bit.
No,
here,
I understand what you're saying, Tom, and like I'll make it really clear as well. I know that there's some people out there, and well, probably a hell of a lot of people that would argue this until they were blue in the face, and you know, be able to pull up some really good research as to why you should keep an arch back. Yeah, that's right. You know, so and I definitely, I really don't care about entering into debates with people about this stuff personally, because you know what works for you works for you. But I know, the way that we still teach in Unity Gym, we do still teach deadlifting and squatting with that arch back because it's worked for us. But we definitely take the spine through as much movement as we can in other ways.
Yeah.
And Jefferson curl is a great one. All of the spinal stuff that we do for our warm-up, the spinal waves, and I can vouch for it. I mean, I've had a bad back for long before I met you, and since I started doing this stuff, this spinal mobilization, it's completely changed.
I can vouch for it too, because I've seen it in the clinic. When
because you work on me.
You're in good nick here. Like, that stuff's really working.
I think it's actually quite difficult, because I've looked into a lot of this research now, and it makes a whole lot of sense, you know. And I've also watched, you know, people, friends of ours, power lifters, you know, who have lifted with like massively rounded backs. And I've read a truckload of Stuart McGill's work as well, where he's always spoken about, so long as you have the base level conditioning and you've worked for that. And let me point out, because a lot of people who are listening won't know the difference between a round back and what powerlifters refer to as cat backing, which is when you attempt to lift a weight once you've, and the angle of your spine, like the flexion or extension, alters during movement based on the fact that you can't actually hold the beginning position. So you'll see it typically in the gym. Someone will try and lift with a straight back, and the weight is too heavy to hold with a straight back, and they round out during the range of movement. That's what we refer to as cat backing, and that's terrible for the spine. And Stuart McGill's spoken heavily about the fact that that is what delaminates the vertebra basically, and leads to disc bulging and all those horrible problems, you know, degeneration. But since reading all this, I looked and I'm like, holy shit, as a trainer, should I go back and start reteaching people how to lift? And I've experimented with it a little bit myself. What's your take on that?
I think I have an answer to that. So if I can use a tennis analogy, we've all probably seen tennis players. So if you take Federer and Nadal, they have two very distinct styles. And if we could somehow make them look exactly the same in terms of their appearance, we would still be able to identify who they are based on the way they play, because they have a very distinct style of hitting a forehand and a backhand. So my point is, when it comes to teaching how to hit a forehand and a backhand, there are certain rules. But why do they always look different? The way I hit a forehand will be different to the way you do. Certainly the way Rad will, because he's probably useless.
Good, I'm glad you pointed that out for all the listeners out there.
So why is that? It's because we're all different. We're different heights. We have different shaped joints, different muscle proportions, all that sort of thing. So we both learnt how to take a racket back and hold the grip a certain way, but for some reason they end up looking different. And basically, I think a good tennis coach, a good personal trainer, a good teacher will play every ball on its merits. So whoever's in front of you at the time, you need to look at their body, what it can and what it can't do, what it likes and what it doesn't like. And at the end of the day, if they lift the weight up, that's the end goal. But it's the end goal to not injure yourself at the same time. So I think you just have to look at each individual and decide what works for them and what doesn't.
And that's right. I mean, everything is completely, what works for you is not going to work for me. And some people have got a history of back problems, and you need to address them in a certain way, and so on and so forth.
Some people probably shouldn't squat because of their knees or the immobility through their ankles. A lot of the time you hear people saying, "Oh, I can't squat because I've got tight calves." It's usually not the case. It's usually because they have poor dorsiflexion through their ankles, which they can't. I think a lot of us know now that the shape of our hips determines largely how we'll squat. You know, the way our acetabulums are pitched,
angled,
and the angles that our knees should be, and all that sort of stuff. But people forget as well that the shape of your talus bone between your tibia and the other bones of the feet, the navicular and the calcaneus, they determine to a large point how much dorsiflexion you can get, which is basically if you're bringing your shin closer to your foot. That sort of movement. The opposite of planting on your toes. It's not always due to tight calves. It can be, but it might just be the shape of your bones that dictates. Look, you can't actually dorsiflex more than this, which means that you can't sit your hips lower than a certain amount. So don't try to go arse to grass. Unfortunately, that's mum and dad's fault. They've given you this set of genes, and just squat to just above thighs parallel or something, and that's and then see what happens in the lower back after that. Does it round or can it keep straight?
Absolutely. It's very important that that's reinforced, and that's something that we go on a real quest here at Unity for people for self-discovery, for people to find those norms for themselves. Not everyone can squat like Rad's body. If you look at him anatomically, the length of his tibia, fib to femur and to spine is perfectly created for squatting. It's ideal. He's got a long spine, he's got short femur, and it works really well, And there are ways, if you've got long femur, there are ways of foreshortening. You can turn the knees out and things like that, and you'll get a little bit of an effect. But each to their own. You have to go on that sort of self-discovery to find what works right for you. And we always say that. And it's best to not do that with shitloads of weight on your back.
Exactly.
You got to do that in the beginning. Now, Tom, we're going to divert into a few other things other topics that we're talking about, but I'm looking at the time, and I know you have to get back down to your clinic. So, any last thoughts from Rad before we let you go?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, thanks so much for coming in, Tom. Having this conversation, I feel like we're only just getting started.
We could go for hours.
We could.
Absolutely.
So we're definitely going to get you in again because there's some great conversations coming out of great topics coming out of this conversation. And my final thought is, guys, if you've got, you wouldn't believe the kinds of things that I go down and see Tom and his team for. I've gone for golfer's elbow, for tennis elbow. I've gone for problems with my knee. It's not just for your spine and back. And if any of you guys are suffering at all, you don't need to, because I'm telling you now that some of the best people in the industry are just down the road. So check them out at Cartwright Physical Therapy.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Tom,
kind of you.
Yeah, and where can we find you? It's Cartwright Physical Therapy. We're down on Walker Street.
Essentially on the corner of Walker and Berry Street. It's 157 Walker Street, opposite Snap Printing.
Fantastic. And guys, if that fails, if you can't find him, just look up Tom Cartwright on Grindr, and
you'll see a picture of Rad and I.
That's all right, mate. Have a great day, Tom.
See you guys.
Thanks for coming in, man.
We've lost our wide-angle camera for some reason, but anyway, we'll keep cracking on. Right. Thank you very much.
Right. See you, bro. Okay, so what do we got next, Yani?
Very quickly,
what are we going to be doing?
What I wanted to talk about is a couple of studies. We'll do our study review of the week, and then we'll bring this thing in for a landing. Now, I spoke to the guys this morning about our what do you call it? Our sleep. And one of the first studies that I want to talk about here, again, is about early eating, early dinner, and early to bed. And this actually, it's funny, I read this study and then I listened to one of my friends, Ben Pokolsky. He's got a new podcast. Check it out. It's called Muscle Experts. He had a guy on there yesterday who was discussing metabolic flexibility and the ability to be able to burn fat and carbohydrate or glycogen substrates and both of those. So I'm just going to quickly turn this camera around so we get Rad and myself in this view because we lost our big camera. Anyway, what I was really quite surprised to find out, both listening to this, I knew that this affected people, but I didn't realize how much. What they did was, and just to give you a bit of background test, what they've done is they took healthy people and unhealthy people burn fat and carbohydrate at very different levels. We know that, right?
Yeah.
Now, what they did in this study is they took a bunch of really healthy people that they had tested and they had proven that they had very good metabolic flexibility. That's the term we're using here, which describes the ability to go from glycogen burning or energy to fat metabolization and bouncing between those two different energy substrates really easily. That's what's called good, healthy metabolic flexibility. Now, what they did with these healthy people is after they'd confirmed that they were in that basket of good, healthy metabolic flexibility, is they then deprived them of sleep. They first went to 6 hours and then all the way down to 4 hours on a few nights. And after 3 nights of sleep deprivation, where they were only getting half of the sleep, 4 hours of decent sleep, these people all of a sudden went from being really good at fat metabolization to being absolutely terrible at fat metabolization. And it was quite alarming how quickly that occurred. Now, this really rams home the fact, and also this study that I was looking at here, that if you guys are depriving yourselves of sleep at night, if you're not getting to sleep early, and you're not eating your dinner early, because when we're digesting food in our sleep, we're not actually sleeping very well, you're not going to get lean. You're not going to be able to lose weight. Now, Rad and I take this for granted because we've got young kids and we're in bed pretty early, like 9 o'clock, because we get up at 4:45 or 4:30 in the morning, you know. But you know, it was quite shocking when I went around the classes this morning and asked people what their bedtimes are, and they're talking about the fact that they go to bed at 11, 12 o'clock at night, and then they get up to train at 5, you know. You guys are sabotaging yourselves. You're sabotaging your results. It's pretty insane.
Yeah, it's a sad thing. It's something that we've known for a while, this concept of, you know, needing to recover properly and get the right amount of sleep if you want to be healthy and fit. But it's really good to see studies like this, you know, coming out and being you know, becoming available to us so that we can talk about them. But it's such a horrible thing that we're suffering with in the digital age, where we have all this technology that is so good for us and does so much for us, but it also, you know, can be so bad for us. And you only need to go back to when we were kids 30 years ago. You know, all you had was a TV, and the TV gets pretty boring at a certain time in the evening. But now with
unless Game of Thrones is running a season.
No, I'm talking about 30 years ago.
Yeah, I know.
And it gets boring pretty quickly. But now we've got all our smart devices where we can get YouTube and whatever we want at any time. So you could literally watch something amazing or do something highly entertaining at any minute of any day. And it's up to us as an individual to still, you know, put our health first and make sure that we do what, you know, we keep things balanced.
Yeah,
it's all about balance, isn't it?
Absolutely. Early dinner, early to bed for weight regulation, guys. I cannot stress to you how important this is. And the other thing that came out of this study was quite interesting was if you get 8 hours sleep but you go to bed at 1 a.m. and wake up at 9, it's not as effective as if you go to bed at 9 and wake up at 5. So super, super important. Try and get to bed before midnight. That's really, really important. Now the next one I want to tip on, and we'll rip this because we got to bring this in for a landing. We've been going for a while. I do apologise about the stuff up earlier. Anyone who caught this from the very start, it was my fault. I own it. I kept the mics muted as we played the intro reel. We're still learning our new tech here. There's a lot to think about. And I am running the show whilst trying to host it. Now the second one I want to talk about, because this came up during the week for one of our guys who went and got a really good DEXA. I spoke to him. He's losing a lot of body fat. He's on track. But what he found was he'd lost 1 kilo of muscle, and you know, we work extremely hard to buck the trend and get people to improve body composition by increasing muscle mass at the same time as losing fat mass. Very, very hard thing to do. Some people genetically will be geared to do it easier than others. But anyway, what I was interested to learn this week reading another good study was that DEXA scan, although it is absolutely more accurate than skin folds and bioimpedance measures where we stand on one of the plates and hold the handles or your Tanita scales at home, it still has its limitations. And one of them is that DEXA struggles to differentiate muscle glycogen and water in your muscles. How does this affect us? Well, recently, over the last couple of years, we've started really advocating intermittent fasting, and in some cases, even almost a ketogenic diet, depending on what people's goals are. If they want to live forever, we recommend that. We recommend getting that blood glycogen down, increasing the healthy fats, proteins well balanced. But what that can do is affect your DEXA results. So if your muscle glycogen is depleted, and this is a hard thing to do, you've got to be training pretty hard, you've got to be fasting. Even during a fasted state, it takes a long time to deplete muscle glycogen. And if you're on a keto diet, you don't necessarily deplete muscle glycogen because our bodies produce glycogen from many different substrates. So when you're eating mostly fat, you will still be converting different molecules and pushing that into, turning that into glycogen, pushing that into your muscle. But it can affect your DEXA scan when you're on a ketogenic diet and when you're very depleted if you're training really hard. So keep that in mind, guys. It will still show that you're burning fat, but it can also show that you're losing a little bit of muscle when in actual fact you're not. Just food for thought. And other than that, any comments? I don't know if we're allowed to name the guy that got that cracking result.
Oh, well, let's not, just in case it's something that they don't want.
He freaks out. But anyway, guys, keep crushing your goals. That's pretty much it. Final thoughts, Rad?
Final thoughts would be
You had a really good quote that I wanted to...
Yeah, we had so my final thought, I remember it actually, I don't even need to look. So just because you're doing a lot doesn't mean that you're getting a lot done. So don't confuse movement with progress. And that's actually something that I was talking about to the guys in the class this morning when they were doing a pretty poor effort of a movement that we call Test the Water. And I was talking about the concept of just turning up every day and going through the motions and how people do that. You can see that in dance, you can see it in martial arts, in gymnastics, in musical practice, in anything really, where people are turning up, they're doing the work, but they're not really focusing on what they're doing and they're not getting anywhere. And if you look at that same person, someone can have 20 years of experience and someone can have 20 times 1 year experience. Don't be the person that gets 20 times 1 year experience. Be the person that gets 20 times experience by making sure that you put deliberate intent into the work that you're doing.
Yeah, that's an epic topic and something that we could talk about all day, guys. So don't be confused with movement. It's not necessarily indicating progress. Make sure that you're working hard, crushing all the little things outside of the obvious to get to where you want to go, and don't self-sabotage yourself. That's it for us today, folks. We are done. A couple of small technical issues, but we got through it. And you'll be able to find this on the Sound of Movement podcast, coming very soon. Thanks for all the feedback about our thumbnail. We think it's awesome. I'm still definitely the better looking half, but Rad's getting there. Anyway, guys, until next week, Monday, we got a really exciting guest coming on the show next week. I won't give it away just yet. Let's rock it. It's time to train down here at Unity. Unity.
See you guys.